What is the strangest thing you've seen that you cannot explain? My dad passed away in 1992. Among other things, I inherited a 1980 Chevy LUV pickup. It may have been through ignorance, but I had looked high and low for 4 bolts that needed to be replaced on the U-joint. They were special and shouldered. I stopped everywhere looking for these bolts. Neither Chevy nor Isuzu had them. I was at my wit's end as I had been looking for about 2 months. One day, a buddy of mine and I stopped at a hamburger joint that had a parts store next door. We got out and I said I'm going to check out this parts store, and I brought one of the bolts in my hand. As we were walking to the store, a guy that I can only describe as looking like the Jesus your grandmother had a picture of on her wall walked by us and said howdy or some shit. But here's what freaked me out. He said those look like they are U-joint bolts for a Chevy LUV pickup. I bet you're having a heck of a time, yes, he said heck, finding them. Come over here, I think I have some in my truck. He walked over to his truck, looked in a 5-gallon bucket, and handed me 4 perfect bolts, exactly like I needed. My jaw dropped. I tried to pay him or buy him a hamburger at the very least, and he said no, just help someone else if you get the chance. This was 28 years ago, and I remember it like it was just yesterday. My youngest daughter would always beg to buy the seasonal decorations when we'd go shopping. She passed away from a brain tumor when she was 5, and as a way to cope, I started buying those seasonal decorations, and now decorate my house with them as the seasons and holidays change. Her favorites were these colorful birds from Target. A couple of years ago, just before Easter, I was deep cleaning the house. One of the Easter birds went missing. I assumed one of my older kids had knocked it off the shelf with their backpack as they had left for school that morning. I looked around where it should have fallen, but couldn't find it. We had a younger dog who loved to chew up everything he could find. I checked all his usual hiding spots, but couldn't find it there either. I continued to clean the house, vacuum, dust, full top-to-bottom cleaning of the common areas of the house since I was home alone for the day. Finally, I'm done, and I still haven't found that bird. I've found a lot of missing socks, Legos, and a whole bunch of other crap. I grab my cleaning stuff and say out loud, "Daughter, it's okay if you're playing with it, but will you let me know somehow so that I know the dog didn't destroy it?" I walk out of the living room and put the cleaning stuff away under the kitchen sink. I come back into the living room, and there that bird is. It's standing on its feet in the center of the living room. These birds have pipe cleaner-like feet, so they were difficult to get to stand right. And it's standing. I got a chill. I picked it up and looked it over. There weren't any teeth marks or slobber, so it hadn't been in the dog's mouth. I just said, "Thanks, daughter. You're welcome to play with it whenever you want," and put it back on the shelf. I have no way to explain it other than the paranormal. Years ago, when my wife was pregnant with our second child and about to give birth, my mom came to stay with us for a few days to help take care of our oldest child. One early evening, Mom asked for a pen, paper, and an envelope. When I gave them to her, she wrote on the paper, sealed it in the envelope, and gave it to me, saying, "Put this in your pocket and don't open it. You'll know when," she said. 30 minutes later, my wife announced it was time to go to the hospital. She was in labor. So we did, and about 9 hours later, our second daughter was born at 3:45 a.m. She weighed 8 pounds, 11 ounces, and was 20 inches long. This being pre-cell phone days, I called my mom from the hospital to tell her the news. She answered the phone and immediately said, "Before you say anything, open the envelope." I did it. It said, "Girl, 3:45 a.m., 8 pounds, 11 ounces, 20 inches. I kept that paper for years. When my mom died, I went to our documents safe where we kept it, but it was gone. I was dating a girl eons ago, and she left my house one night after hanging out to go home. She called my house about 10 minutes later because she'd curbed her car trying not to hit a dog that looked like a ghost. I was annoyed, thought she was full of it, but I helped her unlock her steering wheel and she was on her way. Years later, I was riding with a completely separate/unrelated girlfriend, and I was looking down at some CDs in my lap to try and figure out what to play next. Out of the blue, she yells, "Fuck!" and then she locks the brakes up and we slide to a stop. I asked, "What the fuck are you doing?" and she responded, "Did you not see that dog run right out in front of us? It looked like a ghost wolf." I looked around, and sure enough, we're right around the same spot where my previous girlfriend had also seen this ghost canine/wolf thing, which freaked me out once that clicked. So while I technically never saw it myself, the inexplicable, ethereal canine freaked out two different girlfriends of mine, and none of us have a clue as to what it actually was. Former Egyptian Air Force Mirage 2000 pilot here. I was one of the unlucky few that got selected to serve their mandatory years as pilots. It was considered unlucky because you stayed in the Army a lot longer than soldiers and officers, just because of the amount of training that comes with flying a fighter jet. Anyway, fast forward 2 years, I'm a fully trained Mirage pilot, though I don't know much about dogfighting and fighter jet weapons, as I didn't take it on full time. Like I said, this was mandatory service that everyone had to do. It's just, I was selected to be a pilot for some reason. I only flew like 6 times in the 3.5 years I served. Anyways, picture this. It's a pitch black night, and I go out for patrol on the Red Sea border between Egypt and Saudi Arabia. My friend is commanded to patrol the border on Sinai and Israel. That's usually the most actively patrolled border. Anyway, here I am flying in Egyptian airspace when an extremely bright light shone through the cockpit, almost blinding me for a moment. It was so bright it got right through the tinting on the windows and my helmet. It was almost like that memory wiper in Men in Black. It lasted at least a minute, so just as I'm about to call this in to get a possible explanation, the air tower guy starts frantically sort of shouting, but not loudly, like he's talking really fast and in a worried tone, and I can't hear him through the radio that well, so I couldn't tell what he was saying. I tuned into the frequency the other pilots were on, and they were all just as shaken as me. 30 minutes later, a calmer voice instructs us to all land immediately, as there is an emergency being investigated by the more experienced pilots. So we land 2 at a time, I steer my plane into the hangar, and I get out. Everyone has this frightened look on their face, eyes wide open, mouths shut, and sort of lost. Like, you talk to them and they're like, "Sorry, what were you saying again?" So I go straight to the base commander hoping for an explanation that puts my mind at ease. When I get there, I find that he's in his office on the phone, shouting about unidentifiable aircrafts infiltrating Egyptian airspace, and that's when I really got scared. I have finished my mandatory service years ago, and I'm currently studying law in Washington, but that night, I constantly think about. I was an RA when I was in college. All the RAs would come back a week before the winter semester started for training, which meant no students were back in the dorms. We were the only ones in the building. One night, I heard the door to my shared bedroom open. The sound of the doorknob turning woke me up, so I kind of groggily said my suite mate's name. She would sometimes come through the bathroom to talk or ask me for advice. That's when I realized my suite mate was on extended holiday in Italy, so no one should have been in our suite at all. I immediately shot up and looked toward the bathroom door. It was almost pitch black in my room, but next to the bathroom door, I could see the perfect outline of a human face wearing a flat-brimmed hat. I couldn't see the details of the face, but I could see shadows where the eyes, mouth, and nose would have been. It was as if someone was standing next to the door, staring at me. I had no idea what to do because no one was back in the dorms. I knew that the nearest RA was 2 floors away and wouldn't hear me scream for help. I stared at the face for a few seconds, and it stared back. Then I shifted slightly on the bed, and it completely disappeared. I got up to check the door, and it had been closed the whole time. It's been almost 7 years, and it still freaks me out when I think about it. I was taking a trip with my then girlfriend, and we had to cross the Hudson River to get to where we were going. There are only a handful of bridges across, and I know them all from having grown up in the area. On that particular trip, we were supposed to take the Bear Mountain Bridge, but I got off the wrong exit and passed it. We decided it wasn't that big of a deal. The next bridge, the Newburgh Beacon, was actually closer to where we were going. It would just bring us over a little bit past our destination, but not enough to really matter. So we kept on driving, not really paying specific attention to where we were, since it was probably 20 to 30 minutes until we got there. Well, we never actually crossed the Newburgh Beacon that day. We also never crossed the Bear Mountain. and we certainly didn't drive an extra half an hour to the mid-Hudson or turn around and go back to the tap. When we did take a minute to check where we were and how close the bridge was, we found we were already on the other side of the river. No bridge, we were just already there. So either there's a secret tunnel somewhere under the river, we had our memories erased, or we found some kind of spatial rift somewhere in the Hudson Valley. I was driving home from work on the back roads and was driving behind a car that was the same make, model, and year of my car, just in a different color. Further down the road, we both got into the turning lane to turn left onto a long, straight road with open fields on either side. The car in front of me turns onto this road, and I wait for a car to pass, and then I make my turn as well. It took me less than 5 seconds. However, when I turn onto the road, the car that had been driving in front of me was nowhere to be seen. This road has no turnoffs and it's long and straight, so you can see pretty far ahead of you. The car had just vanished, and I still think about it to this day. I have a dash cam now, but I wish I had had one back then, because I question what actually happened that day. When I was young, my parents and I relocated across the country to Maine. We lived in a very small town, and our house was old, beat up, and on many acres deep in the forest. It had 2 stories, with the top story being the main level and the bottom story being the bedroom level. My bedroom had several large windows that looked out into the forest. I don't remember having curtains or blinds, but I'm sure I must have, because my mother never forgot details like that when decorating my bedroom as a child, but I must have left them open one night. I remember waking up in darkness with a faint glowing orb of light hovering just outside my window. I watched it in utter terror as it went slowly across one window and then the next before pausing, flashing briefly into my room before shifting into the third and final window and disappearing altogether. I was so upset by the ordeal that I went and woke my parents up, and my stepfather stormed the backyard with his gun in hand. There was nothing, and no sign of the strange orb. My eyes are watering as I write this. Deep down, as an adult looking back, I realized that orb was anything but magic. It was someone's flashlight. It never happened again, but I'm still afraid of having window blinds open at night. I am really not spiritual or have any belief in psychics, ghosts, mind reading, fortune telling, any of that. But only a couple weeks ago, there was an exchange that shook me a bit. I'd taken the train out to do a hiking trail and camp for a few days, finishing up in a town I'd only ever briefly visited once, a couple years prior on bonfire night. As I made my way towards the station, I was stopped by a perfectly ordinary-looking middle-aged woman. "You don't believe in souls," she said. "What?" "You don't believe in souls, but you also know you lost yours." "What do you mean?" "You have absolutely no aura." I started to walk away, and she just raised her voice to shout after me. "You had a procedure, a medical procedure, on your brain, and your soul left." Of course, it sounded like madwoman bullshit to anyone that could hear it. But 15 years ago, when I was 18, I had 16 sessions of ECT. Being a large number of sessions in a short space of time at a young age, it left many difficult and long-lasting negative effects on me that I still struggle with to this day. But one of the most pervasive feelings is what I've only ever been able to describe as whatever it was that made me me. Like the essence of me, my spark, had disappeared. I never really knew how to put this feeling into accurate words, so despite my lack of belief, I'd always described it as feeling like I'd had my soul removed. I was driving one night in a really foul mood and speeding. Like when I say speeding, I mean at least 25 over the limit. Anyway, this car gets behind me, and for some reason I can just tell it wasn't a cop. It was a full-tented Chevy truck with weird lights on it, like comically large aftermarket front headlights. Once it got behind me, I got a really eerie feeling I can't explain, like my body just knew something was wrong. Anyway, I figured if it was a cop they would light me up for speeding, but for some reason they just kept pace with me, also speeding themselves. So at this point, I'm getting a little weirded out, so I turn off the freeway and they follow me. I turn into a gas station and get out. I figure if I'm going to get axe murdered, at least the cameras will pick it up and give my family some closure. Something just didn't sit right with me. I knew something was up. As I'm getting out of my car, the truck rolls its windows down, and what I saw still haunts me to this day. It was a heavily disfigured man, the likes of which I can only compare to that guy Rocky Dennis, from the movie about a man with a crazy disfigured head who falls for that girl who loves him for him, and not the abomination that is his face. He starts to motion me with his finger, like telling me to come closer. I don't care if he was going to give me the winning Powerball numbers, there was no way in hell I was going to approach his car. I bolt inside the gas station at this point, and my whole body is shaking. I try and tell the clerk what's going on as they stare at me, probably thinking I'm drunk or high off my ass, as my story doesn't make any sense. Then I go to look outside, and the truck is gone. I still have nightmares to this day. Fall of 2009, I was sick. Like super sick. It was a few weeks before my amputation, and I was battling a severe bone infection. I was hopped up on all kinds of antibiotics and pain medication. I'm a huge Yankees fan, so my best friend got us tickets for the ALCS game at Yankee Stadium. She pushed me around the stadium in a wheelchair with a shit ton of blankets on me, just to put a smile on my face. My friend leaves our seats to go get some hot dogs and stuff. This is where it gets weird. As soon as she leaves, an older Irish gentleman sits by me. He offers me some of his spiked hot chocolate, but I said no thanks and explained that I was on a lot of medication. We began talking, and I told to him what was going on with my life. He asked if I was scared to have my leg amputated, and I told him that I was. I was really frightened of the unknown. He gave me some pretty valuable life advice and comforted me. He assured me that everything would be fine. He told me that if you have to be an amputee, try to be the best damn amputee that there is. My friend comes back with food and asks who I was talking to. There's no one next to me. I guess I must have hallucinated this, but I don't know. It felt more like some kind of angel or being that came to let me know that it would be okay. I guess my guardian angel is an Irishman with spiked hot chocolate. A tiny humanoid creature underwater. To this day, I still scour the internet in hopes that what I saw was an actual type of fish, but I still haven't found anything. I was snorkeling at the age of 16 off the coast of Australia with my dad. Seeing all the fish was so beautiful. My dad drifted a little far from me, but there was a reef protecting us from any large sharks, so I wasn't scared of snorkeling on my own. I swam down towards the coral to get a closer look at a small octopus when something caught my eye. A human face. A human face with an eerie smile and big eyes. It was sort of standing, casually leaning against the coral with a body about 4 inches tall and a head no bigger than a grape. It resembled a naked human male, but had gills by its neck and webbed feet, smooth all over like a Ken doll. I stared at him, he stared at me. I stared back and tried to rationalize what I was seeing. I reached out to touch him/it, and the thing casually evaded me by stepping to the side, all while his creepy smile remained. I could see my dad has turned around and was swimming closer to me, so I called him over to see this crazy little creature. The creature turned toward where my dad was swimming over from, seemed to notice him, then looked back at me coyly. Then it walked away, walked on its little webbed feet on the coral and disappeared down through a little hole on the rocks. I tried explaining to my dad when he came over, but he couldn't explain anything like that either. He just said something about Aboriginal spirits, and I shouldn't mess with it. I swear I think about that little fish man every day. I was a sophomore in college. I walked into my math class like any other day and sat in my usual spot, about 4 seats in on the 3rd row. Even though we didn't have assigned seating, there was always a girl sitting 2 seats to the left of me, with an empty seat between us, and her male friend sat to her left. They seemed to just be good friends, always laughing with never any reason to give concern. This day in particular, I sat down, got my spiral and pencil out, and just quietly sat there looking forward and thinking about what I was going to do after class. Suddenly, I got this eerie feeling. I looked up to my left, and my heart practically stopped. The girl was staring straight at me, blank face, and her eyes were shining like a bright, piercing electric blue, shining like lasers. Nothing at all natural. I can't explain it accurately. I was basically paralyzed and couldn't move or say anything. I eventually blinked and looked forward, then looked back, and the girl's head was turned back to her friend, and she was talking again. About 2 years later, I was with friends and we were driving to a restaurant. Traffic was building up since it was rush hour, and we were stopped in the right lane. I'm in the back seat, and I happen to look up, diagonally and to the left, and through the windshield. I look into the car sitting in the lane next to us. Its back bumper is parallel to our front bumper, so I can see the driver easily. He's turned almost completely around and looking back at me, staring intensely. Even from that distance, I could see his eyes were that piercing, bright, laser-like blue, and I froze again. Just like the last incident, I was eventually able to blink, look away, and then immediately look back. The man was turned forward, the light turned green, and we all started moving. It's been about 15 years and I haven't experienced anything like that again, but it fucked with my mind for a long while. When I was around 16, my parents used to let me and my sister throw house parties. After the party was over, anyone who wanted to was allowed to sleep over in the living room. Well, one night after a party, there's about 30 of us in the living room, chatting, shouting, laughing, and just generally being too loud and annoying. Next to the living room, through a door, were the stairs. As we were all talking, everyone hears someone coming down the stairs, clear as day, loud footsteps coming down each step. 30 teens, all at the same time, stop talking, thinking we're about to be told off for being too loud. So I got up and went to the door, ready to apologize and tell my parent, whichever one it was, that we'll be quiet from now on. The second the footsteps reached the bottom of the stairs, I opened the door, and there was nobody there. Not a soul. I turn around, mouth wide open, to look at the room filled with my friends behind me, and they are all as white as a sheet. Some of the girls actually left after that. This happened about 10 years ago, and I have never been able to explain it. There was no time for someone to run back upstairs, and no alternative exits they could have taken. 30 people all experienced the same thing that night. I was around the age of 10, and my younger sister was 7. Usually, whenever my sister was scared during the night, she would wake me up, and so I would comfort her and tuck her back into bed. However, this night was different, and she was shaking me furiously and crying, couldn't speak, etc. So I rushed to her room, and after a few minutes, she could finally tell me that she could hear faint footsteps up and down the small hallway outside our rooms. So we tried to be quiet and listen for the footsteps, and couldn't hear anything, and I thought she must be hearing things, etc. Then, after we calmed down, we started hearing the footsteps, and they were actually so clear, it sounded like there was someone right outside the room. We both feared that someone broke into the house and was wandering around. So, funnily enough, I grabbed a pillow to protect myself and my sister in case the intruder came inside. At this stage, myself and my sister are both crying, and nothing is happening after 2 minutes of hearing footsteps. So I gain the courage to scream help, and I run down to my parents' room on the other end of the house. I wake them up and let them know what happened. Dad checks the entire house plus the backyard, and finds nothing. He then goes to sleep. Relieved, I decide to lay in my sister's bed with her so she's less shaken up from the situation. Around 15 minutes later, wide awake, a very, very loud screech happened in the kitchen for like 2 seconds. Like something was dragged on our floor tiles. Immediately, we both jump up and scream and cry. It was so loud, my parents even woke up to see what it was. We left our room before our parents and saw our wooden kitchen table chair somehow dragged on the tiles around 5 meters away from the kitchen table. We were all shocked and could not explain what happened. We thought it might have something to do with the footsteps. This is hands down the scariest thing I have ever gone through.